She looked me in the eye one night and said, "I like you, but I'm not in love with you." I didn't beg, I didn't argue, I just nodded, because sometimes silence says goodbye better than words ever could. I remember the night she said it like it was etched in my chest with fire. We were sitting on the faded leather couch in my apartment, the one with the deep cracks that caught the lamplight just so, and the rain had begun a slow, relentless patter against the window. It wasn't a storm, not really, just a drizzle that carried the city's quiet hum, the hum of streetlights flickering through puddles, neon reflections bouncing against damp pavement. I had poured her a glass of wine, the kind I didn't usually drink, the red so dark it nearly absorbed the light. She took it, her fingers brushing mine just long enough to leave a spark, and then withdrew as if the contact had been too much, too soon, or maybe not enough. I didn't know which. Enjoying the story? Give us a thumbs up, share this video, and join our family by subscribing now. We sat in silence for a while, letting the rain fill the gaps between us. She was quiet that night in a way that made my chest tighten, that kind of quiet that feels alive, dangerous even. And then she looked up at me, her eyes sharp, almost pleading. "I like you," she said, voice low, careful, deliberate, "but I'm not in love with you." I nodded, because I didn't have words. I had rehearsed 1,000 responses in my mind on the way over, angry ones, pleading ones, dramatic confessions, but when the moment came, the words dissolved into nothing. Sometimes silence says goodbye better than words ever could. I watched her eyes flit away from mine, tracing the outlines of my room as if she were trying to memorize the furniture. The way the shadows pooled in the corners, the way the lamp cast an orange halo against the wall. I wondered, not for the first time, if she noticed things like that in other people's homes, or if it was only me, only here, that she allowed herself to pay attention. It wasn't the first time I had felt her slipping away, like the sand through my fingers. But that night, the slip was palpable, tangible. I could feel the space between us grow without a sound, a slow, widening chasm that the rain seemed to echo, tapping against the window pane like impatient fingers drumming a farewell. I stood up, almost unconsciously, and walked to the window. The city stretched beneath me, a blur of amber and steel and wet concrete. I could see the headlights trailing through the streets, people moving inside tiny squares of light, someone's life happening somewhere else, someone else's story unfolding, while mine seemed to fracture in this apartment. In the soft glow of a lamp I didn't want to turn off. She stayed on the couch, hands wrapped around her glass, eyes tracing my silhouette, like she was trying to decide if she should reach out, or just let me disappear into the night. I turned back to her. "It's okay," I said finally. It sounded hollow even to me, a sound caught between reassurance and surrender. She nodded slightly, lips pressed together, like she was holding something in, some confession or apology she didn't want to voice. The tension was thick enough to taste, metallic on my tongue, and I realized I didn't know if I wanted her to leave or if I wanted her to stay, just so I could understand why she wasn't in love with me. The night stretched. We didn't talk. We didn't move. The rain continued to fall, relentless, indifferent, and somewhere in the distance a siren screamed, a sharp, cutting sound that made my stomach lurch. I wondered, for the first time, if love, or the illusion of it, was just a siren, loud and bright and impossible to ignore, until you realize it doesn't care about you at all. Weeks before, we had been inseparable in the way people on the verge of falling in love are, laughing over late-night coffee, sharing secrets in the dark, the brush of hands that lingered too long and yet felt natural. I had believed, with that kind of blind certainty that only comes with longing, that she felt it too, that the way she looked at me in the glow of streetlights or across crowded rooms meant something profound. But that night, watching her trace the rim of her wineglass with her finger, I realized that certainty had been mine alone. After she left, I wandered the apartment in a kind of numb daze. The rain had slowed, but the streets were still slick with water, neon signs reflecting in puddles like shards of broken glass. I opened the fridge for no reason, stared at the half-empty bottle of wine I hadn't finished, and thought about the way she had said it. "I like you, but I'm not in love with you." The words were simple, almost casual, but they carried a weight that felt like gravity pressing down on my chest. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just let the silence settle over me like dust. And in that silence, I began to notice things I hadn't before. The faint scratch on the coffee table where her ring had caught the wood, the way the light from the street lamp fell perfectly across the corner of the couch she had chosen to sit on, even the subtle scent of her perfume that lingered, teasing in the air. Each detail was a small betrayal, a reminder that she had existed here, in this space, in my life, and that she was gone now. Days passed in a blur of work, coffee, and long walks I took just to hear my own thoughts. I found myself returning to the places we had been together, the little corners of the city where our laughter had echoed off brick walls, where I had thought our love was a certainty written into the air itself. And everywhere I went, I felt her absence like a shadow, a presence that was there only to remind me of what I had lost. Then came the dreams. I started dreaming about her every night. Not the easy dreams, the sweet ones where we held hands and smiled, but fragmented, jagged visions. I would see her standing at the edge of a pier, rain pelting her face, eyes fixed on the horizon. I would reach for her, and she would vanish into mist, leaving only the echo of her laughter. Or I would be walking down a crowded street, and she would be there, standing in the middle of the throng, looking right through me, as though I were air. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, the phantom of her gaze lingering on my skin, and yet, despite the pain, despite the ache, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Not because I wanted her back, though part of me did, but because I couldn't make sense of her, couldn't reconcile the warmth of Locke, her presence, with the coldness of her words. I like you, but I'm not in love with you. How could one person hold such contradictory truths at the same time? I began to watch her from a distance, not stalking, not in a way that would draw attention, but in the subtle ways a person notices someone they care about without permission. I would pass her favorite cafe on my way to work, hoping for a glimpse of her smile. I would see her reflection in shop windows, hear her voice from across a park, and feel that same twist of longing and confusion knotting in my stomach. The more I watched, the less I understood. She seemed happy, moving through the world with a lightness I couldn't touch, a freedom I had assumed we shared. And I realized, maybe too late, that she had never belonged to me in the way I had thought she did. My heart had written a story for us, complete with chapters, climaxes, and endings, but she had been reading something else entirely, a book whose pages I could never turn. I started keeping a journal that month, scribbling down fragments of her, fragments of myself, trying to capture what I couldn't hold. I wrote about the way her hair fell across her forehead, the way her laugh could pierce the gloom of a bot. Monday morning, the way her hands moved when she was deep in thought. I wrote about the ache in my chest, the hollow space she had left behind, the nights I spent listening to the rain tap against the window, imagining that each drop was a word she hadn't spoken. And then, in the quiet hours of early morning, I began to notice something strange. I started receiving messages, anonymous ones at first, little things that made my skin crawl. A note slipped under my door, unsigned, that read only, "You don't understand her, not yet." Then a text appeared on my phone, though I couldn't trace it. Look closer. It was the kind of thing that should have sent me running, but instead it drew me in, like a moth circling a flame I knew might burn me alive. I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't even tell myself what I was feeling. Fear, curiosity, longing, obsession. It all bled together into a thick, suffocating fog. And yet, through it all, a small, stubborn part of me refused to let go. Because love, or whatever I thought this was, had a way of clinging, of burrowing into your bones, of making you see shadows where there were none, whispers where there was silence. And so I waited. I watched. I wrote. And every night, when the rain tapped at the window, I remembered her words and felt the quiet, terrible clarity of them echoing through me. I like you, but I'm not in love with you. The messages didn't stop. If anything, they grew more frequent, more cryptic. At first, I tried to dismiss them as pranks, someone with too much time, too much imagination, but the way they arrived, the timing of them, was uncanny. A slip of paper on my windshield when I left for work, a folded note in my mailbox, though I'd checked it twice that morning, a message appearing on my phone while I was halfway across the city reading, "She's hiding something. Don't look away." I began to feel that familiar tightening in my chest, the same ache that had taken root the night she said she wasn't in love with me. Only now, it wasn't just longing or heartbreak, it was fear. Uneasy, creeping, the kind that makes your skin prickle even when nothing is visibly wrong. And yet I couldn't stop myself. I had to know, I had to understand, I had to see. So I started following her in the most careful, almost invisible ways, not with binoculars or a camera, though I thought about it, but with my own eyes, tracing her steps from a distance, pretending the world around me didn't exist. I followed her to the cafe she frequented every morning, noting which table she preferred, how she ordered her coffee. I followed her to the park where she walked after work, watching how she always paused by the old oak tree, running her fingers along the rough bark as if it held a secret only she could touch. I began to notice things I hadn't before, things that didn't make sense. A man who lingered near her apartment, always just out of sight, watching her with something unreadable in his expression. A package she received one evening that she tore open with hands that trembled slightly, like she wasn't expecting it but needed it. And the way she sometimes glanced over her shoulder as if she knew someone was there, though I was careful to keep my distance. The cryptic notes continued. She trusts no one. Look closer, not everything is what it seems. One night, as I walked home in the drizzle, I found a note tucked into the pages of my journal. Stop watching, or you'll regret it. My hands shook as I read it, the paper damp from the rain, but instead of scaring me off, it made me more determined. Something was happening that I couldn't understand, and I was right in the middle of it. I started piecing things together, little fragments, tiny observations that seemed disconnected, but somehow formed a pattern. She wasn't who she appeared to be. There were gaps in her stories, small contradictions in the things she said, moments where her expression flickered before she caught herself. And yet, the truth was always just out of reach, like a shadow retreating when you tried to grasp it. I began to see her in places she shouldn't be, a bookstore I'd never thought she visited, rows of dusty tomes and the smell of old paper, where she lingered by a shelf in the corner, reading something that made her frown. A restaurant tucked away in a side street where she met a man I didn't recognize. Their conversation was low, almost intimate, and though I couldn't hear the words, I could see the way she leaned in, the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand brushed his. And then came the night I saw her at the train station. She was standing on the platform, alone, staring at the tracks, her coat pulled tightly around her. The wind tugged at her hair, and for a moment I thought she might be crying. I moved closer, careful not to be seen, and watched her as the train approached. When it arrived, she didn't move to get on. She just stood there, staring at the wheels spinning on the rails, lost in thought. And then, as if sensing something, she turned her head just slightly, enough to catch the corner of my gaze. I froze. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second, and I saw it, the same indecipherable mixture of fear, guilt, and something I couldn't name. Then the train passed, and she was gone. The obsession began to consume me. I stopped sleeping through the nights, wandering the city streets, retracing her steps, following every trace of her existence. I started noticing patterns, times, routines, habits I could predict almost to the minute. But the more I learned, the less I understood. There was always something hidden, something just out of reach, and the cryptic messages continued to arrive as though someone, or something, was orchestrating it all. One evening, I found myself outside her apartment, the rain slicking the streets, the neon reflections dancing in the puddles. I wasn't supposed to be there, I knew that, but the pull was irresistible. I watched as her door opened, and she stepped out, carrying a small envelope. She glanced around, as if expecting someone, then slipped into the shadows of the street. I followed, keeping my distance, with my heart pounding in my chest. She led me through winding streets I didn't recognize, past shuttered shops and dimly lit alleyways. The city felt different at night, secretive, almost alive with a pulse that I could feel in my veins. And then she stopped. A small hidden courtyard, overgrown with weeds and littered with broken benches. She opened the envelope, took out a piece of paper, and began to read, her voice low, almost a whisper. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see her expression change, fear, surprise, relief, confusion, all in rapid succession. And then she looked up, straight at me, though I was hidden behind a column. Her eyes widened, recognition flickering, and for the first time I realized I might have been seen. I ducked instinctively, heart hammering, and when I peeked again, she was gone. The courtyard was empty, silent, the only sound the distant hum of the city. I stepped forward cautiously, but there was no trace of her, no note, no message. Just an empty envelope lying on the cracked concrete. I picked it up, and inside was a single line, written in neat, deliberate handwriting. "You were never supposed to see this." I stumbled back, my mind racing. Was it a warning, a threat, or something else entirely? And then I realized something chilling. I wasn't just following her. I was part of a story I didn't understand, a narrative she hadn't written for me, a script I hadn't been given permission to read. The next day, I tried to talk to her. I called her, texted her, but she didn't respond. Not an angry silence, not an apologetic one, just nothing. And then I started seeing her in places I hadn't expected. The grocery store, the library, even outside my office building. Always fleeting, always watching, never engaging. And I began to understand something terrifying. She wasn't hiding from the world. She was hiding from me. I started noticing other things too, small details that didn't make sense. A scratch on her wrist, hidden under her sleeve, a mark on her coat, as if it had been torn. And always the sense that she was carrying something dangerous, something she couldn't share. And somewhere, deep in the pit of my chest, a dark, insistent thought began to form. Maybe the reason she wasn't in love with me wasn't about me at all. Maybe it was about what she was protecting herself from, and what she might be hiding from me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every waking moment was consumed by the question, what was she hiding? And why did it feel like the answer could change everything I thought I knew, not just about her, but about reality itself? And then one night, I got a message that froze me cold. Not on paper, not in a note, not a slip under my door. This time, it was a call, a voice I didn't recognize, distorted, almost mechanical. "Stop looking," it said. "You don't know her. You don't know yourself. Stop, or it will be too late." I hung up, my hands trembling, staring at the phone as though it had just delivered a death sentence. And yet I couldn't stop. I couldn't turn away. Something was happening, something I was meant to witness, and it terrified me that I couldn't let it go. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't eat. I wandered the streets, lost in the rain, lost in my thoughts, replaying every moment we had ever shared, every word she had ever said. And then, as the first light of dawn touched the city, I realized the terrifying truth. I had crossed a line. I wasn't just a spectator anymore. I was part of her world, whether I wanted to be or not, and the world she inhabited was far stranger and far darker than I could have imagined. The city felt different after that night. The streets, the alleyways, the very air itself seemed charged, as if the world had tilted slightly on its axis and I had stumbled into a dimension I wasn't meant to enter. The rain had stopped, leaving a damp, metallic scent in its wake, and the neon lights shimmered off wet asphalt, casting fractured reflections that seemed almost alive. Everywhere I looked, I felt eyes on me, even when I was alone. I started keeping a record, not just of her, but of everything that seemed to matter. The notes, the fleeting glimpses, the odd encounters with people who didn't belong, who disappeared as quickly as they appeared. And the more I recorded, the more I realized that her life had layers I hadn't seen, layers that weren't just hidden from me, but from everyone. It began with small things. A door in her apartment that never seemed to be there when I visited with permission. A shadow behind the curtain that moved even when no one was home. The way she spoke on the phone, sometimes in whispers, sometimes with a strange cadence that didn't belong to any language I knew. And the fact that she always seemed to vanish for hours, sometimes days, without explanation, though she always returned as if nothing had happened. I confronted her once about it, though I'm not sure why I thought I would get answers. We were at a dimly lit bar, the kind where the lights are low enough to hide secrets and the music hums like a pulse beneath your ribs. I looked her in the eye, trying to catch some glimmer of honesty, and asked, "Where do you go? What is it that you're hiding?" She froze, the glass in her hand trembling slightly. Then she smiled, not warmly, not cruelly, but like someone who had rehearsed the act of calmness for years. "Some things," she said softly, "aren't meant to be shared. Not yet. Not ever." Her words were deliberate, precise, like a knife sliding along my chest. I wanted to argue, to beg, to demand, but I didn't. There was a strange gravity in her gaze that made me still, like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't survive if I fell into it. So I nodded, as I always had, and sipped my drink, letting the silence stretch between us like a taut wire ready to snap. Then came the first real shock. I had been following her one evening, tracking her to a warehouse district I didn't even know existed, when I saw something that made my stomach turn cold. She wasn't meeting a man, not that I could see. She was meeting a group of people, strangers, cloaked in darkness, standing around what looked like a makeshift altar, candles flickering, shadows dancing across their faces. Her hands moved in patterns I didn't understand, her lips whispering words I couldn't hear. And then she turned suddenly, as if sensing me. I ducked behind a shipping container, heart hammering, and saw her look directly at the shadows where I hid. I don't know why she didn't call out, why she didn't chase me. Maybe she wanted me to see. Maybe she wanted me to understand that this wasn't just about love, about longing, about heartbreak. This was something far bigger, far darker. I left that night trembling, my mind spinning with questions I didn't have answers to. I started researching obsessively. I traced every path she had taken, every shadow I had glimpsed, and I began to notice a pattern. Rituals, dates, symbols, coincidences that felt impossible. And then I stumbled upon something that nearly broke me. An old news article about a woman matching her description, decades earlier, involved in a disappearance that had never been solved. The resemblance was uncanny, the details chilling. I stared at the screen, disbelief twisting in my gut. How could it be? How could someone I had met only months ago have a past that reached back decades? That night I confronted her again, this time at her apartment, the rain returning in steady sheets that beat against the windows. I demanded answers, my voice shaking with anger and fear. "Who are you? What are you hiding?" Her expression softened, almost human in its vulnerability. But then, just as quickly, it hardened into something unreadable. She stepped closer, so close I could feel the warmth of her skin, and whispered, "Some truths are dangerous. You're too deep now, too close. You can't unsee what you've seen." I didn't know whether to run or stay. Part of me wanted to flee, to escape the gravity of her presence and the darkness I had glimpsed. But another part, stubborn, foolish, unrelenting, wanted to follow, to understand, to uncover every secret she carried. And that's when the letters started arriving. Real letters this time, handwritten, sealed with a wax stamp I didn't recognize. Each one contained fragments of her life, names, dates, places, all leading me deeper into a maze I wasn't sure I wanted to navigate. One letter simply said, "You are part of this now. There is no turning back." I started noticing her in impossible places, outside my office, watching me from across the street, inside the library when I had no reason to be there. It was as if she existed in my world and in another at the same time, slipping between realities I couldn't comprehend. And every encounter left me more disoriented, more desperate, more addicted to understanding her. One night I followed her to an abandoned theater on the edge of the city. The marquee flickered, half lit, and the wind whistled through the broken windows like a warning. She moved inside with the grace of someone who belonged there, and I hesitated, caught between fear and fascination. The doors creaked as I pushed them open, and I saw her standing in the center of the stage, bathed in a single shaft of moonlight that fell through the cracked roof. She turned slowly, a faint smile on her lips, and I realized something terrifying. She wasn't afraid of me. She was expecting me. The stage was empty except for her, but the shadows around us felt alive. I took a step forward, and the air grew colder, heavier. My breath misted in front of me, and I heard whispers, soft, almost imperceptible, but urgent. Words I couldn't understand, yet somehow I felt them sink into my bones. She extended a hand, and I took it, though every instinct screamed to pull away. Her touch was warm, grounding, yet electric, like the current of a storm running through me. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice low and trembling, though her eyes shone with a strange intensity. "You can't handle what comes next, but you won't leave. You never do." And then she disappeared. Not like someone walking away, not like a shadow slipping behind a wall, but truly vanished. One moment she was there, hand in mine, eyes locked on mine, and the next, nothing. I was standing alone on the stage, the whispers fading, the moonlight cold and empty. I didn't understand. I still don't fully understand. But I realized then, truly realized, that everything I thought I knew about her about us, about love itself, had been a lie. Or maybe not a lie, but a version of the truth I wasn't meant to see. And somewhere deep in the chaos, I felt the first real stab of fear. Maybe the reason she wasn't in love with me wasn't because of me at all. Maybe it was because she couldn't be, and that was only the beginning. The days after the theater incident blurred into one long, disorienting haze. I could barely eat, barely sleep, barely breathe without thinking of her. The city itself seemed altered, the streets narrower, the shadows deeper, the neon lights more intrusive, like the entire world was conspiring to remind me of her absence. I began wandering the alleys at night, retracing the steps I had followed her along, desperate to find even the smallest clue, the tiniest thread that would lead me back to her. Then the messages returned. Not the notes, not the letters. This time it was something different. A series of texts, each one more unsettling than the last, sent from a number I didn't recognize. The first read simply, "You're closer than you think." The second, "You see her, but you don't know what you see." The third made my hands go cold. "Stop looking, or you'll lose yourself." I couldn't stop. I couldn't even consider it. There was a strange, magnetic pull in the city, in her, in the spaces she occupied. It was like being caught in a current I couldn't fight, like my own mind had been rewritten to orbit around her presence. I knew I should run. I knew I should walk away and forget everything. But something in me, a mixture of obsession, love, and fear, refused to let go. And then I saw her again. I had gone to the old pier, the one where the city met the river, the water dark and reflective under the glow of distant streetlights. Fog rolled off the surface, curling and twisting like living fingers. She was there, standing at the edge, coat drawn tight around her, staring into the water. The wind caught her hair, tossing it like black silk around her face. For a moment she seemed fragile, a human caught in the grip of some unseen force. "Why are you here?" she asked without turning, voice low, carrying over the mist. "I could ask you the same," I said, my own voice trembling. "I need to know. I need to understand." She laughed softly, a sound that was half melancholy, half warning. "Understanding isn't the point," she said. "You've already crossed the line. Whatever comes next, there's no going back." The words hit me like ice. And then she finally turned, eyes meeting mine, and I saw it. A depth of something, pain, guilt, fear, that I couldn't comprehend. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small black box, roughly the size of my hand. She opened it, and inside was a single folded photograph. I stepped closer, compelled, and my breath caught in my throat. It was me. Not a current photo, not a snapshot from weeks ago. This was a picture of me in my apartment, asleep, my journal open on the table, the lamp casting shadows across the pages. Someone had taken this photo while I slept. Someone had been watching me. And there she was, holding it, her expression unreadable. "You're not supposed to see this," she said, her voice trembling now. "But you did, and now—" She paused, swallowing hard. "You're part of it." "Part of what?" I demanded, my hands shaking. "What is this? Who are you?" Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I wanted to protect you," she whispered. "I wanted to keep you safe from what I am, from what I've done. But you weren't supposed to get involved. Now it's too late." I stepped back, my mind spinning, my chest tight. Safe from what? What have you done? Before she could answer, the wind picked up, carrying a low, almost inaudible hum. The fog thickened, curling around us, and I realized with a shiver that we weren't alone. Shadows moved along the edge of the pier, figures too dark to make out, yet there, undeniably present. "They've been waiting," she said, voice barely audible. "They've always been waiting. For me, for us." And then she turned and ran. I chased her along the pier, heart hammering, the fog thickening until I could barely see my own hands. The shadows followed, gliding over the surface of the water, silent and fluid. I shouted her name, but the sound was swallowed by the mist. And then suddenly the world tilted. The pier seemed to stretch, elongate, twist in impossible angles, and I realized I had stepped into a place that wasn't real, or at least not entirely real. She was gone again. And in her place a voice came from everywhere at once, low, resonant, almost hypnotic. "You shouldn't be here. You can't handle the truth." I fell to my knees, chest heaving, staring into the fog that seemed to pulse like a living thing. And then, out of the mist, a figure emerged. Not her, but someone, or something, wearing her face, yet not quite her. It smiled, and the smile was wrong, twisted. My stomach churned. "You see her," the the figure said, voice like hers but layered, doubled, distorted. But she is not what you think. The ground beneath me seemed to ripple, the air thick with something ancient, something malevolent. I realized in a sudden, gut-wrenching clarity that everything I had believed, our connection, her indifference, her absences, had been orchestrated, not for love, not for heartbreak, but for something far stranger, far darker. And then I understood. The letters, the messages, the glimpses, the rituals. She had been protecting me, yes, but not from the world, not from herself, but from the truth that she was part of something older, something that used people like us, ordinary humans, as pawns in games we couldn't begin to comprehend. And in some way I had been chosen. I staggered back, my mind a whirlwind. Why me? I asked, voice hoarse, barely audible. Why involve me? The figure leaned closer and walked. I caught a glint in its eyes, familiar, yet horrifying. Because you were the one who wouldn't look away. Because you were the one who saw. And now, you will remember. Everything went black. When I woke, I was back in my apartment. The rain had returned, tapping gently against the window. My journal lay open on the table, the pen still wet with ink from the night before. I rubbed my eyes, trying to convince myself it had all been a dream. But then I saw it, the black box. On my desk, open, empty, and in the mirror, faintly, impossibly, I saw her, or rather, a reflection of her that shouldn't have been there, standing behind me, smiling, eyes glinting with secrets I was only beginning to understand. I froze in front of the mirror, heart hammering like a drum in my chest. The reflection wasn't mine, at least not entirely. Her eyes, piercing and unreadable, bore into mine, and yet there was something familiar in the curve of the smile, in the tilt of her head. I could feel it, not just see it, like the air around me had thickened, vibrating with a presence I couldn't ignore. "Who are you?" I whispered, though the sound barely carried. The voice that came back was mine, hers, both at once. "You've seen too much, and yet you're finally awake." Finally awake. The words echoed in my skull. I staggered back, tripping over my chair, heart slamming against ribs I was sure would shatter. "Awake? To what?" I demanded. "What have you done to me?" The reflection, or whatever it was, tilted its head, considering me like a predator observing its prey. Then it smiled. Not the smile I had seen before, warm and fleeting, but a knowing, terrible smile that carried the weight of centuries. "Do you remember the theater? The pier? The letters? You were always meant to see, always meant to follow. That is how it begins. You were never in control." I sank to the floor, mind spinning, trying to process the impossible. "Control? What do you mean? I thought this was about you, about us." The figure in the mirror laughed softly, a sound that vibrated in my bones. "Us? No, it was never about love. That was the illusion, the bait. The stories I told were to lead you, guide you, awaken you. You are special, chosen. And now that you've crossed the line, there is no turning back." I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to twist around me, the shadows stretching, reaching as if alive. The black box on my desk rattled gently, though there was no wind. I wanted to look away, to close my eyes, to escape, but some force, deeper than curiosity, deeper than fear, held me rooted. "You mean all of this?" I whispered, voice trembling. "The following, the notes, the messages. It was for this?" "Yes," it said simply, as if the answer were obvious. "For you to understand, for you to see, for you to awaken to your true purpose." I shook my head, desperate for clarity. "Purpose? What purpose? What are you talking about?" The reflection leaned closer, eyes glinting. "You are part of the cycle. We protect the boundary between what is known and what should not be known. The world you inhabit, the city, your apartment, the pier, they are only the surface. Beneath lies something older, something that hungers for awareness, for intrusion. Some humans see, some do not. You have seen, and now you belong to it, to her, to me, to the truth." My knees buckled. The room began to ripple, the walls breathing, expanding and contracting like the chest of some great beast. I tried to speak, tried to ask how, tried to scream, but no sound came. And then I remembered the photograph she had shown me, the one taken while I slept. The creeping suspicion that had haunted me since the pier, the theater, every shadowed street. This wasn't just about following her. She had been guiding me, shaping me, drawing me toward this moment. I glanced at the black box again. Inside, faintly, etched into the lining of the box, were words I had not noticed before. "To awaken is to see beyond. To see is to choose." "Choose?" I croaked. "Choose what?" You can refuse, the reflection said, voice gentle now, almost tender. You can turn away and forget everything, return to the illusion of normal life. But the moment you do, part of you will vanish. Part of your consciousness will remain behind, trapped in the threshold. And one day, you will return, drawn back, because the cycle never forgets those who have glimpsed its edges. I swallowed hard, my mind reeled with disbelief, fear, and a strange surge of exhilaration. Could I do it? Could I walk away from everything I had learned, everything I had felt, everything I had been drawn into? Could I forsake the pull that had guided me, that had shaped me from the moment she first appeared in my life? And if I stay, I asked, voice trembling, then you awaken fully, you see the truth, you inherit the weight, you are part of her now, part of this, and together you will guard the boundaries that others cannot comprehend. I looked around the apartment, at the familiar yet alien objects, the shadows dancing in impossible angles, the faint hum of energy that pulsed beneath the surface of reality itself. I realized then that my life, everything I had known, had been a prelude, and that stepping fully into this truth, was both terrifying and inevitable. I took a deep breath, and then another. My reflection smiled, waiting, patient, knowing, and I made my choice. I reached out, and for the first time, our hands met. The moment our fingers touched, the world fractured. The walls melted into darkness, the floor dissolved beneath me, and I felt a sensation like falling and flying at the same time. 1,000 whispers cascaded through my mind, memories that weren't mine, experiences I had never lived, truths I had never imagined. And then, the stillness. I was somewhere else, somewhere that existed between places, between times, a room without walls, without floor or ceiling, yet entirely complete. She stood before me, real, impossibly real, and smiled. "Welcome," she said simply. "You understand now." I nodded, though my heart still pounded with a mixture of fear and awe. I think I do." Her smile softened, the tension in her shoulders easing. "The cycle continues," she said, "and now so does yours." I didn't fully comprehend what that meant, but I felt the weight of it settling in my bones. And yet, alongside the weight, there was a clarity I had never known. The pain, the obsession, the fear, it had all been leading to this awakening. I was no longer merely a witness. I was part of the story, part of the cycle, part of the hidden world that coexisted with our own. Time passed, or maybe it didn't. Minutes, hours, years, it was impossible to tell. I learned quickly that the boundaries here were fluid, mutable, and that perception was the only constant. I began to see patterns in shadows, understand messages in whispers, perceive truths hidden in ordinary objects. The city, my apartment, the pier, the theater, they were all anchors to this reality, nodes of understanding that allowed us to navigate the threshold between the known and the unknowable. And through it all she was there, sometimes guiding, sometimes observing, sometimes distant, always enigmatic. She had been right. Love had been a distraction, a bait to draw me in, but now I understood that our connection had been necessary. Without it, I would have turned away, chosen ignorance, and lost something essential in the process. Weeks, no, lifetimes passed, and I found a strange equilibrium in this existence. I understood fear, I understood obsession, and I understood that the human heart could endure truths far greater than it was built to handle. I also understood something unexpected, the depth of empathy, the power of connection, the resilience required to navigate a world that defied logic, yet demanded comprehension. Eventually, I returned, or at least part of me did. The city looked the same, yet everything felt different. I could perceive the subtle currents of energy, the invisible lines connecting people, places, and moments, and I understood finally with a clarity that both exhilarated and terrified me. I would never be the same. I walked through familiar streets, visited old haunts, and yet nothing was ordinary anymore. Every shadow, every reflection, every passing stranger held a potential secret, and somewhere, deep inside, I smiled. I had glimpsed the extraordinary behind the mundane, faced fear, embraced obsession, and emerged on the other side, changed, awakened, and part of something far larger than myself. I think back to the night she first said it, the night that began it all. "I like you, but I'm not in love with you." At the time, I thought it was a heartbreak. I thought it was the end, but in truth, it had been the beginning, the catalyst that drew me into a world I had never known existed, a world that now lived inside me as much as I lived in it. Sometimes, when I'm walking alone, I see shadows moving just beyond perception, and I feel her presence there, guiding, observing, waiting. And I smile, because I understand now. I understand that love, longing, obsession, these are all threads in a much larger tapestry. And sometimes the person you think you are saying goodbye to is the one who leads you to the place you were always meant to be. Have you ever felt drawn towards something you didn't fully understand? Something that challenged every certainty in your life? How do you recognize the boundaries between love, obsession, and destiny? And where do you draw the line between curiosity and danger? When someone or something changes your life so profoundly that your entire perception of reality shifts, do you resist or do you follow the pull, even when the path is uncertain and the cost is unknown? And finally, what truths lie hidden just beyond your perception, waiting for you to awaken to them, whether you are ready or not?